Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. Today's topic, Starlink. Speeds are going up, but so are prices. Be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So Starlink is an interesting service. It's a constellation of satellites that are already up there. It's a venture from SpaceX, Elon Musk, and it's providing broadband service around the world, including in the Ukraine, which I'll talk about. And there was a little bit of question mark in the third quarter of 2021 because while they were making progress on download speeds prior to that, suddenly the download speeds started going down. But in Q4 2021, speeds went back up again. This is all based on Ookla data, so I guess they're like a quarter behind as they calculate all of this stuff. So we're going to look at the speeds today. We'll also look at a price hike that's just now being put into effect. And again, I want to talk a little bit about Ukraine and what Starlink's doing there. So first off, you see here from Ookla, Starlink hits 100 plus megabits per second download speed in 15 countries during Q4 2021. That's a very important number because for funding here in the United States for the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law that has the $42+ billion for broadband deployment. That's important there, but it's also important for RDOF, and Starlink has won lots of different areas in the RDOF auction, but they've not yet been authorized or even declared ready to authorize for that because there's still a question as to technically whether they can hit everything. And of course, again, 100 by 20 is where you want to be on that. So looks like they're good for the 100 plus megabits per second download speed in most areas, but there's still a question mark on the upload speeds. They're not quite there yet on that. But as we see, as we look at broadband in other countries, including this country, getting over 20 megabits per second is not the norm right now anyway. Now, of course, if you're going to do fiber, you can do symmetrical service up and down, it's easier. But for the traditional kinds of wireline services that are in a lot of places, we don't have that. So here we see for satellite internet has become fast satellite internet has become increasingly available to more and more people across the globe. It's already a huge boom to rural communities that might otherwise be too remote for fixed broadband service. So that's really where Starlink shines because you have the cost is already sunk on the satellites that are up there. You don't have to go out and lay fiber or even put up wireless towers to get it to people. I mean, it's just the satellite's up there, and as long as you have a fairly clear view to the sky, and there's constellations up there, so you can kind of track them in one area of the sky, then you are looking good. So Ookla says we've analyzed fresh satellite internet performance data from Q4 2021, including results from 7 additional countries to update our ongoing series. So they look not just at Starlink, but they look at fixed broadband, they compare it to that, fixed wired broadband, and then also the other satellite providers, which really at this point, I mean, who cares, right? Because they're not anywhere close to what Starlink's providing. And you see here the Starlink beats a lot of these fixed, as far as the average speeds, the average fixed broadband speeds in other countries. So we see here in the US, Starlink was the fastest satellite provider during Q4 2021, and speeds increased over Q3 2021. And that was pretty much the case as they were increasing their speeds from Q3 to Q4. So you see here, Starlink's median download speed increased from 87.25 megabits per second, so they had really dropped in Q3, to 104, almost 105 megabits per second in Q4, an important benchmark that inches Starlink closer to reaching the rural or the RDOF baseline of download speeds greater than 100 megabits per second. So really they were over there on their median, but they still have an issue on the upload. Starlink saw a slight decrease in median upload speed from 13.54 megabits per second in Q3 to 12.04 megabits per second in Q4, still short of the median upload speed for all fixed broadband, which rose to 19.49 megabits per second in Q4, which was up from 18.03 in Q3. So you can see here kind of in the little chart, so to speak, where you've got SpaceX Starlink right here, you've got all fixed broadband here. So they're pretty close. They're not bad at all on the download, and you see even on the upload speed, all fixed broadband, again, they're slightly under 20. And then you can see where the other satellite providers are. This is their download speeds and upload speeds for Usenet and Viasat. So they're not even close. Starlink performance continues to vary widely at the county level. So you do see that. You've got your median speed chart here. So your darker purple is better. And you can see in areas where they're better than, some areas are better than others. And this is going to have to do, I'm sure, with satellite distribution, how new an area is, because, you know, if you've got that, if you're going to start taking orders in a certain area, you're going to have not as many subscribers. And, you know, over time, as you add subscribers, you've got more demand on the network and your speeds are going to go down. So I think they see some of that. And we see some of that here as we look at this data in countries that have rolled out. During Q4 2021, we saw about 130 megabit per second range in performance between the U.S. county with the fastest median download speed over Starlink. That was Miami-Dade County in Florida at 191 megabits per second, and the county with the slowest median download speed, Columbia County in Oregon, at 65 approximate megabits per second. And Starlink was definitely available up in this area of the country first as they were launching their satellite constellation and the first satellites were going up. This is where they were providing service. So again, this may be due to more people on. It also may be due to not just the fact that it was launched first, but you're going to have more people in rural. This may be a very rural county that they're talking about here in Oregon compared to Miami-Dade. Not rural, I'm sure. So you're going to have fewer takers in Miami, even if it was added later. You're going to have fewer takers. Because really where this service is meant for would be, and where people are going to want it, and where they're going to pay the additional premium for it, is going to be in those rural areas. Australia, Starlink nearly triples fixed broadband download average, a median download speed of 141 megabits per second, and that compared to all fixed broadband providers at 51.35 megabits per second. So again, you can see Starlink is way ahead of the all fixed broadband providers in Australia. And Australia is a great example of an area that's, I'm sure, got vast expanses. I mean, most everybody lives around the coast, right? So you get these vast expanses internal in the country that are, you know, you might have a customer every 100 miles, who knows, or more in different parts of Australia. So it would be a great place for Starlink, and they're obviously doing well there. Austria, Starlink download speeds outpaces fixed broadband by more than double, 131 megabits per second, almost 132, compared to 50 megabits per second on fixed broadband. They also have a faster median upload speed at 19.9 compared to 14.34. So they're very close to the 20 megabit per second upload speed right there. Again, you can see the difference in the chart. They're doing very well, and again, exceeding even on the upload speed, which is what you have down here, this purple color. Belgium, Starlink much faster than fixed broadband, 155 versus 76, 77 megabits per second. Huge difference there. Brazil, Starlink slated to enter the Brazilian market soon, so they're not there yet. So right now, what they have in Brazil is they've got Viasat and all fixed broadband. Viasat is sitting at, looks like about, what did it say here, 66 megabits per second, and that dipped slightly in Q4. It was 66 in Q3, it was 62 in Q4. And their fixed broadband there in Brazil is not much better, but Starlink will be entering that market soon, apparently. Canada, Starlink performance reaches milestone during Q4 2021. In our last article, Starlink's median download speed decreased to slower than fixed broadband in Canada during Q3. It was at 84.55 megabits per second versus 90.67 megabits per second. But in Q4, Starlink's median download speed leapt ahead, achieving 106.64 megabits per second, while median download speed for the fixed broadband increased to 96.39 megabits per second. So both Starlink and fixed broadband went up, but Starlink leapt past them here. Says Starlink is faster than overall fixed broadband in nearly every province. Let's see that. Starlink's median download speed was faster than the median download speed for all fixed broadband in 7 provinces during Q4 2021. Chile, Starlink debuts fast speeds, but still much slower than scorching fast fixed broadband. So apparently they have good internet in Chile. Starlink reached 118, almost 119 megabits per second, but still much slower than Chile's median download speed for all fixed broadband providers at 168, really 169 megabits per second. So you can see here all fixed broadband very high, but again, Starlink's doing very well. But on the upload speed, you can see a vast difference there. So they've got a good upload speed there as well. Colombia, no Starlink there. Usenet decreased overall over download and upload speed. So you see Usenet down here, the other satellite provider in that area, not as expected. These are the difference here, by the way, if you're not aware. Starlink is a low Earth orbit satellite system, so their satellites are a couple hundred miles, let's say, what is it, like 200 to 400 miles in orbit, compared to a geosynchronous satellite like HughesNet, which is like 30,000 miles in orbit. So it's a lot further away. The satellites are older, so you've got much higher latency. You don't have the upload and download speeds that you do with these low Earth orbit satellites. So that's the big difference there with HughesNet and Viasat compared to Starlink. In France, Starlink download speed increased, still faster than fixed broadband. Median download speed of 121 megabits per second. That's up from 102 in Q3 2021. You can see there Starlink again in the lead. Germany, Starlink blazes ahead of fixed broadband download speed at 115.58 megabits per second, which was much faster than the fixed broadband median speed of 65.86 in Q4. Ireland, Starlink download debuts nearly double that of fixed broadband. So this was a new market, or at least I think it was a new market, or maybe it's just when they started testing Ookla. Probably a new market. 123.51 megabits per second versus 65.89 for all fixed broadband. So Starlink again way in the lead there. Italy, Starlink dominates against fixed broadband. The median download speed of 124.39 megabits per second is a huge leap ahead of Italy's fixed broadband average of 40, really that's about 50 megabits per second. See that? Mexico, apparently they don't have good broadband there because Starlink impresses during Q4 2021 debut. Starlink, which only became commercially available in Mexico during November 2021, made a significant splash during its brief Q4 2021 debut, achieving a median download speed of 142 megabits per second. All fixed broadband providers combined at 36.56 megabits per second. So again, they don't have good broadband there. You can see Starlink way ahead. Now again, new market. South of our border, maybe some of this is due to the fact that they don't have that many subscribers on the satellites that are covering this particular area. So we'll have to see how this goes over time. Netherlands, Starlink faster for median download, lagging on upload and latency. They're generally going to be slower on upload and latency, so that's nothing new there. Netherlands, which is new to this list, has some of the fastest median mobile and fixed broadband speeds in the world. Starlink achieved a median download speed of 138.4 megabits per second compared to 95.55 over fixed broadband. Starlink lagged noticeably behind upload speed at 15.6 megabits per second versus 30.87 megabits per second on fixed broadband. Starlink also has a higher latency at 45 milliseconds versus 11 milliseconds on fixed broadband. So this 11 milliseconds is pretty low in general, and that's a high upload, whereas 30.87 is a high upload speed in general for fixed broadband when you average that out like you see in other countries. New Zealand, Starlink slowed slightly, still faster than fixed broadband, 116.44 megabits per second, down slightly from 120 megabits per second in Q3 2021, likely due to increased adoption. It was faster than New Zealand's median fixed broadband download speed, 98.61 in Q4, up from 84.98 in Q3. So their fixed broadband went up, but so did Starlink, and it's still surpassing that. Poland, getting closer here to Ukraine. Poland, Starlink is a fast option for Poles, much faster than fixed broadband at 129.29 megabits per second to 83.88 megabits per second during Q4. So what is that? Starlink was much faster than at 129.29. I think that's compared to, this is the fixed broadband, 83.88 megabits per second. Portugal, Starlink far ahead on download speed in debut, fixed broadband much faster on upload. 140.35 megabits per second compared to 94.62 megabits per second. And then you see again the upload speeds, fixed wireless is going to be much higher. It is much higher here. Looks like over 50, 65.52 megabits per second upload speeds, whereas Starlink's at 30.16 megabits per second, which is really a good upload speed for Starlink, again, probably because it's a new area. so less people on the satellites. The UK, Starlink's still nearly twice as fast as fixed broadband median. And you can see here, a lot of times people talk about how the internet in the United States is way behind other countries, but I mean, you look at other countries, we're actually far better in a lot of cases. And we have much broader, a lot of these countries have a much broader area of rural areas that are bringing our speeds down when you look at the medians. Starlink showed a faster median download speed in the UK, 121.94 megabits per second, up from 111 in Q3. The country's median for fixed broadband, 57.66 megabits per second in Q4, and that was up from 53.16. So again, they're doing good there. Competition among satellite providers is rapidly increasing. We'll continue to watch closely. So there are other satellite competitors that are going to be coming on the market. OneWeb, I believe, has birds up in the air already. You've got Amazon Kuiper, which I don't think they have launched anything yet, but that's another one, another low Earth orbit satellite system that is planning on competing here with Starlink. So we'll see how that changes things. And again, I mentioned, so Starlink just announced that they're going to be hiking their prices for monthly service and the starter kit, and even if you put down a deposit. Originally, opting into Starlink required a $499 upfront purchase of a starter kit with all the necessary supplies, including a user terminal. And these are terminals that they used to call it a UFO on a stick. It's basically a pole, and it's got this dome-shaped antenna it's a phased array antenna. There's no moving parts, I don't believe. It's just a phased array in that it uses a technique to move the signal around without having to use a motor. So they got this terminal antenna for connecting with SpaceX's satellites. Customers would then pay a $99 monthly charge to keep the service running. Now the new monthly price going forward will be $110. All new orders of the Starlink kit will now cost $599 instead of $499, and anyone who put down a deposit for the original $499 kit will have to pay $549 instead, so they're upping that a little bit. The new monthly prices will come into effect at different times for different customers, and what they told their customers was, you know, if you put down the deposit at $549, you can get a refund. They can provide that, or if you put down the deposit and we're planning on paying, what is it, $499, and now you have to pay $549. They said you can go ahead and cancel your service, but if you do, they said that you will be basically put at the back of the line again, so you'd lose your spot in the queue. And people are waiting on these things. I mean, if people have, you can see their speeds are really good. So if people are in an area where they just have really rotten internet service, they really want this service. So I don't think these prices are going to really cause a lot of people to want to quit the service or not sign up for the service if they're in an area where they need it, and that's really the key. And why would somebody want the service if they're not in an area where or if they're in an area where they don't need it? That doesn't make any sense. So they said, SpaceX, Starlink said, the sole purpose of these adjustments is to keep pace with rising inflation. This is a good time to do that. With inflation the way it is, people understand that. I'm sure actually their costs have come down. The costs on these terminals have come down quite a bit. So I think that's mostly an excuse. You know, everybody's being impacted by inflation, but again, it's a good time to mention that. So far, the company has launched more than 2,000 Starlink satellites, and an executive for SpaceX claimed this week that Starlink has 250,000 users worldwide. I'm assuming that's users and not people that are signed up, because there are a lot of people signed up waiting for the service that can't get it yet. SpaceX also recently sent thousands of terminals to Ukraine upon request of the Ukrainian government. I'll talk about that here in a minute. When SpaceX first started offering Starlink to customers, the cost to construct each user antenna ran about $3,000, which meant SpaceX was selling its kits to customers at a loss. And they're still going to be selling their kits to customers at a loss. In April of 2021, Shotwell claimed that SpaceX managed to shave down the construction cost, putting it around $1,300 to build each terminal. In August, she vowed that the user terminals SpaceX created by the end of 2021 would be roughly half of what our current user terminals cost. So I guess I suppose if they've cut it in half now, maybe they're close to covering their costs on these terminals. In its email to Starlink customers announcing the price hike, SpaceX touted the latest improvements to the entire system. They said, since launching our public beta service in October 2020, the Starlink team has tripled the number of satellites in orbit, quadrupled the number of ground stations, and made continuous improvements to our network. Going forward, users can expect Starlink to maintain its cadence of continuous network improvements as well as new feature additions. So they are in the situation where it's very expensive. I mean, again, they're having to launch satellites. So, they launch these satellites 40, 50 at a time. I think they were doing 60 at first. I think they've cut that back a little bit. So launching that many satellites, they've got 2,000 up there now, and then they've got the cost of these terminals, and then these satellites don't stay up there forever. It's got like a 5-year life cycle up there. So after 5 years, they start deorbiting. So you got to replace them over time. So it's a very expensive business to be in. So they do have to charge a lot. There is a market for it, but that market is very specific to people who do not have good internet. And some people were not happy, obviously. Like I say, most people who I think have the service or are waiting on the service and they have reason to be are going to keep it. They're not going to cancel their service. They're not going to say, oh, never mind, don't sign me up or don't send me the terminal. It says here, Musk's SpaceX has news Starlink customers won't like. They may not like it, but I don't think it's going to impact them that much. There's just a couple of comments in here I want to point out. So the Starlink price hike was not greeted enthusiastically on social media, but you know how social media is, right? I mean, it's almost useless to try to get a temperature of what's really going on social media. It's beginning to look like the Tesla solar roof deal, one person tweeted, referring to the problems the company had with its discontinued panoramic sunroof. I was considering Starlink, while we already have affordable high-speed internet, but this price increase makes the choice easier, another person said. They probably weren't really considering it if they have affordable high-speed internet. Why would they care? Why would they want satellite service? Long waiting list. If you already have affordable high-speed internet, why would you want Starlink, which is pretty expensive, middling speed internet with very limited availability and a long waiting list of quite desperate people with no other broadband options? And that's true. If you already have affordable high-speed internet, why would you want the satellite? You really wouldn't, unless they got the cost down to what the others are, and it's not going to get down that low. Another person said that I think the people saying it's already too expensive have certain biases. That's true. They live in an area where they have affordable high-speed internet. So they are not the market. This person said Starlink is for rural customers in areas that don't have access to broadband level internet, the commenter tweeted. When you compare other satellite services to Starlink, it's not even close. Starlink is easily the best deal, and that's true. Again, if you look at the Usenet and the Viasat numbers, and their prices are not that much. I think there's a greater delta now that Starlink's raising their prices, but it's still expensive to get Usenet and Viasat, and it's not good service. So a lot of people are, looking at dropping that and going with Starlink. And then lastly, I wanted to talk again about Ukraine. So, if you're not aware, Starlink did send terminals to Ukraine, so people can't get them now. Here in the U.S. and other places, they're having to wait, but they did send a whole bunch of them to the Ukraine. But of course, priorities, right? So, I mean, that's a very terrible situation there. And if you can help keep the country connected, that's good. And it's actually helping in the war effort as well. So Starlink helps Ukraine's elite drone unit target and destroy Russian tanks. And of course, any loss of life is terrible, but it's just an overall terrible situation over there. So SpaceX's Starlink internet is proving to be useful for Ukraine's military as it fights the Russian invasion. Satellite connection helps the Ukrainian Army's aerial reconnaissance unit do its work of using surveillance and attack drones to target Russian tanks and positions. Drone teams in the field, sometimes in badly connected rural areas, are able to use Starlink to connect them to targeters and intelligence on their battlefield database. The Ukrainian unit's most sophisticated drones are connected using Starlink, the Times London wrote. If we use a drone with thermal vision at night, the drone must connect through Starlink to the artillery guide and create a target acquisition. The quality of the link is excellent, the Ukrainian officials say. Fedorov said through a translator, using a Starlink connection from an undisclosed location. We're using thousands in the area of thousands of terminals with new shipments arriving every other day, the Post reported. Over 5,000 satellite dishes in Ukraine, so they have sent thousands of these into Ukraine. Starlink is also being used by Ukrainian civilians, though it isn't clear by how many. The Post quoted an anonymous source who is familiar with Starlink's effort in Ukraine as saying that there are over 5,000 Starlink terminals in the country. The Starlink app that is used to help set up the service reached a total of 98,000 installs across Ukraine's App Store and Google Play combined, the Wall Street Journal wrote last week. So there's a big difference there between 5,000 and 98,000. So I don't know if the number's somewhere in between or that's just a bunch of downloads of the app. So we don't know. So again, Starlink's doing well. The real question is going to be, whether or not they get any traction with RDOF here, because again, they have won quite a few areas across the country in the RDOF auction. The FCC has been going through all of the long-form applications of various providers that bid on that. They've released a lot of money. Some of the last one was lots of areas that were bid on by Time Warner and Charter. There's also a lot of small operators that are getting money for that. And RDOF is an area where Starlink, could make a big significant difference in rural areas. But whether or not the speeds that they're showing are sufficient for the FCC to grant them awards in areas, we don't know yet. The FCC is probably looking at it closely and deciding where are the most difficult areas for a fixed wireline provider to reach, or even a fixed wireless provider to reach, where Starlink can be an option. And maybe they'll just give them those areas and just be really specific as to where they're going to let Starlink go, because those are the areas where Starlink makes the most sense. As I've said before, there's lots of areas right now that are unserved or underserved that even as I speak are starting to be covered by fiber, or at least planned to be covered by fiber. So there's ARPA money that's been put out there. There's lots of people that are either building out the broadband right now with fiber, or they have plans to because they've gotten funds or they know they're going to be getting funds. But the issue is that with the supply chain problem, the supply chain issue that we have right now, you could be a year out before you can even get a piece of fiber. And then the equipment, you've got equipment that could be months out. It could be 3 months, 6 months, a year before you get some of the equipment. I don't know if that's as bad as on the fiber side. So something like Starlink that's already up there, that we'll have to see how that plays into that equation. Thanks for joining me. I hope this was helpful. If so, give me a like on the video. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and click the subscribe button and click the little bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live. Thanks again, and I will see you next time for Broadband Deployment News. Bye.